Welcome back to another edition of the Enough Said program. My name's Dan Barreiro, joined as always by Justin Gaard and Lori Fisher out this week. So our good friend Natalie Brinegar, who pinch hits early and often. We always love seeing her face, and she is back with us today. Hi, Natalie.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
Good to have you back.
It's always great. We're starting off with the Timberwolves, probably not surprising this week. It's been a roller coaster of emotions the last 24 hours. Timberwolves center and superstar Karl-Anthony Towns is out indefinitely with a torn meniscus in his left knee. He will undergo surgery and be reevaluated in 4 weeks. Really bad news for Cat, the team, and fans as we're nearing this home stretch of the season. But we saw an amazing win over the Pacers Thursday with an incredible game and play by Anthony Edwards. So the Wolves still first in the West as of right now.
Well, I felt like Justin, in one short, less than 24-hour period, it felt like we endured a whole season, right?
Yeah.
Because you really can't go with a much more dramatic swing from the news breaking on Towns and ultimately finding out that indeed it is a tear. And indeed, to that extent, it's worst case because it's at least 4 weeks. It may end up being more.
Right.
And so you got that hanging over a team that always seems to have a cloud over it, even when
and a city,
in a city, a franchise that is hungry, fans hungry for something. They're getting something, and then they're saying, well, there's going to be no payoff again. And then at the end of the day, you have quite literally, I think, one of the most mythic. It's got to be top 5 regular season mythic Timberwolves performances. Now again, we're grading on a.
It's not a long list, but don't worry about that right now.
But Anthony Edwards was transcendent yesterday in that way that had me saying a year ago he has a chance to be the greatest Timberwolf of all time. Let me just give you what he did in the last 111 of the game: a 3-point shot, a 15-foot pull-up, a one-handed 14-foot runner, one of 2 free throws. He missed the second one, made up for that with one of the greatest blocks at the end of a game to save a game that you'll ever see in any game, any season. And we learn again in a week where Anthony didn't show up for tip-off, just why this organization, like most, is going to tolerate a lot of the nonsense because there are a handful of NBA players who can do what he did in this game.
And how high would he have jumped if the rim didn't get in the way there? I mean, it looked like he was going to elevate and levitate maybe another 18 inches, 24 inches. I don't know. On the Towns thing, people always wonder when they move to town. I deal with a lot of coaches, right, with the Gophers. They come into town and go, why are Minnesotans always waiting for the other shoe to drop? Why are you guys so negative? Why can't you enjoy anything? I would just present to you the Karl-Anthony Towns injury. I mean, this is why we are the way that we are. Not only did he got hurt, Dan, we don't even know when it was. We don't know what happened. We just woke up on, Thursday morning?
That's right.
And they said Karl-Anthony Towns might have torn his meniscus. We don't know exactly what's going to go on. And it's almost April, which means it's almost postseason time, and he may or may not be back for it. And you just think about how many more different things can we endure. And then, like you say, Anthony Edwards, I think, recognizing the moment, which he is wont to do, kind of put the cape on, right, and said, well, it'll be fine. Now we'll see how often can a guy play like he did last night. If he plays like that every night, everything's fine. But a good reminder of this isn't the Jimmy Butler meniscus injury where you really didn't have that next superstar yet. Towns was still young. Obviously, we know what they had given up, right, for the trade and everything. Wiggins was Wiggins. They didn't really have all of that. Now they have a guy that can carry them a little bit. And who knows? Maybe Karl can come back early in the playoffs, as Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting. But it was a strange swing of emotions from everything's horrible to maybe everything will be okay for the short
Edwards,
term.
this is, I think, Edwards' best game.
Yes.
44 points, 0 turnovers as well.
That's a big key.
There are people out there, and they're idiotic, who think on the basis of winning one game without Cat, that we're a better team.
Yeah,
they're just flat out better.
Stupid.
They're not better. By the way, they might be good enough with the fact that they've got a legitimate sort of, you could say, Cat clone,
Backup.
Cat light in Naz Reid, that there's no reason they should fall off the edge of the table in the regular season. But for the postseason, you need Cat. And if he's not available or he's not the same guy, that's going to make it really hard for this team.
They're a good team without him. I mean, they were a play-in team,
They can run
essentially.
better probably without him.
Yes.
They ran really well last night.
They were a play-in team last year when he missed 50 games, right? I mean, that's enough said right there.
How many games did they win last year? 42.
So, and we've already surpassed that, I
Enough
believe.
said.
So
Yeah.
they're not a championship team if he's not on there, which is what a lot of people thought they could be.
Well, for the second year in a row, the Big Ten women's basketball tournament is underway in Minneapolis. Fortunately, the Gophers no longer in it, but the tournament is sold out for the first time ever. 49,000 people took part in the fun last year. This year, more than 109,000 people expected over the 5 days at Target Center. You can call it the Caitlin Clark effect. The Iowa superstar now holds the all-time college basketball scoring record.
Guys, you were there.
Yeah.
How did it? What's the atmosphere been like so far?
It's already been good, and Caitlin Clark was nowhere near the Target Center. Now, she was there on Thursday night because Iowa was in town, and they were watching the game before because they will play tonight.
TV captured some shots. They're not stupid on TV.
They know where the bread is buttered, for sure, and there she is right there.
Yeah.
There's Caitlin right there with the rest of the Hawkeyes. And because there's some ticketed seats at Target Center for the women's event, there's also a lot of general admission, and because of that, people are already lining up. I mean, there's people already lined up Friday morning. The Iowa Hawkeyes don't play until 5:30 on Friday night, and they will wait there to get as close a seat as possible to watch Caitlin. Last year was kind of the big coming out party in terms of her and Iowa nationally when they came through here. It was, Carver Hawkeye Arena North. They won the Big Ten tournament. They went on to the national championship game. This year, tickets have been sold out for about the last month or so. There's not even enough hotel rooms for some members of the teams participating in the tournament because Iowa fans and Caitlin Clark fans jumped the gun and got all the rooms. So people have had to scramble to find spots downtown because of what's going to happen. It's going to be fun. If you have a ticket, I think it's going to be one of those core memories because it's been a great vibe already, and Iowa hasn't even played yet.
Here's what I don't like. The event is in our town, and I feel utterly disconnected other than the Caitlin Clark connection. And
Sure.
That's because, and the men, we're hosting next week, right? I try to do a quick research. I don't have the Gopher women's team. When it comes to the Big Ten tournament, I don't have them. I went back like 15 years, and I couldn't find one time where we won more than one game.
It's been a battle.
Gopher men,
Yeah.
I went back all the way, basically the last 20 years, we've only gotten to as much as the semifinals 4 times. So
Right.
part of my lament is it's hard, even though it's here, to feel completely, like I said, at one with it when we're not a factor in it. And I'm not asking us to win a bunch of Big Ten titles, but we don't even have very many runs to think about. And that's the unfortunate part. Is that going to change? The men have made improvement.
Yeah.
The women, it's the first, the year for the new coach. You're obviously going to give her time. But right now, I just feel like that's something we're kind of watching like it's an experiment from afar. And we're upstairs looking at it, and then all we can do is, I guess, now applaud for Caitlin Clark and
Yeah.
the Caitlin Clark phenomenon.
And there are billboards already in town with Caitlin Clark there. I think it's one finals appearance for each team, the men and the women. Tubby went to the finals,
That's
I think,
right.
once, but had to start earlier in
30.
the week. By the time they got there, completely out of gas. Richard Pitino had the Gophers in the semifinals once, the year that they, I think, were a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. But you're right, the women, nobody has a worse percentage historically in the Big Ten basketball tournament than the women. They have not made very many runs. In fact, last night, Thursday, was only the second time that they've played Michigan. You start to think about it. Well, Michigan's always the Thursday, Friday team.
Right.
Minnesota's typically been a Wednesday, Thursday team. They just
Enough
haven't had
said.
that many opportunities. So, yeah, I'm curious to see where the men end up in terms of their seeding next week, because depending on their draw, I do think they have an opportunity with a quasi-home game to make some noise and make a quote-unquote little run. I'm not saying they're going to win the thing, but as long as they don't maybe match up with Purdue, I think they could do something like that. But you're right, it's hard to be completely invested in it when you don't feel like you have a chance.
Well, all the talk the last few days is, will Vikings quarterback Kirk Cousins go to the Atlanta Falcons? That's where his wife Julie's from, but he's made his home in Minnesota last few years, so are Cousins' days numbered here?
I think there's every reason to believe they are. For me, this went back several days ago. Actually, the Sunday radio show that I did, I pretty much proclaimed it over, playing some sound, the last bit of sound from the head coach, Kevin O'Connell, who went from being Kevin O'Connell, which is he's our guy, we feel good about our situation with him, all the pieces are in place here, he knows how I feel about him, etc., to, well, yeah, we love him, but we're well aware that other teams are going to be interested, and we pretty much already know that illegal tampering has gone on. Now, he didn't say it that directly, but that's what he meant. And to me, he sounded much more defeated. And I'm going, uh-oh, something's up. And now most of the experts believe that the deal with Atlanta likely is all but done. And again, if it comes to that, I'll throw it back to you as a Kirk Obo, although you're a more reasonable Kirk Obo than some of them.
Thank you.
The Kirk Obos in general swooned over what with Kirk? The Netflix doc, everybody fell in love with them. Kirko chains, and he's grounded, and he's different, and he could be one of us, and he only cares about winning, and he's going to give us eventually, this time at least, the hometown discount. And what are we hearing now? Kirk's going to go whoever gives him the best deal, and that's probably going to be Atlanta. Not illegal, but contrary to what everybody's been telling us, somehow he's wired differently. So we're finding out in the end, it's not necessarily about, what can give this team that I've already invested in and that's invested in me the best chance to win. It's, I can get a better deal in Atlanta. And there's a couple of bonus things about my wife's connection. I'm on my way.
Yeah, well, he's the one that's going to have to live with that, Dan. That's my response as the Kirk Obo, because he's the one that wanted to pretend that he was different than everybody else, taking the big check and saying it's about winning, it's about structure, it's about, putting down my roots and leaving a legacy someplace. He's not going to have one anywhere unless he wins a Super Bowl in Atlanta. That's what it would take. I almost believe there's too much Atlanta steam. I'm kind of wondering, is there too much Atlanta? Is everybody going too far in on Atlanta? And is that because Cousins is telling them to go far in Atlanta? I mean, Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk basically outed Julie Cousins for being mad at the Vikings. I thought that was interesting, saying she was mad at the Super Bowl. So clearly messages are getting out, and you know how that works. There's a reason why. He wants the price to go up as high as it possibly can. There's a little bit of a skeptic in me saying that, is the Atlanta thing too strong? Mm-hmm. Because it seems like it has come on really hot and heavy this week. Is that intentional? I don't know. But if he does go to Atlanta and it is like $50 million a year, even as a huge Kirk Cousins guy who thinks he probably hasn't gotten enough credit and probably got too much blame for his career not turning out the way some others have, I have to bid adieu at this point, because you can't pay him that much and JJ and try to field a team, by the way, which they still have to do.
Let me give you a stat. 6 years with Kirk Cousins, the Vikings winning percentage, .540.
Yeah.
6 years before Cousins got here, .567. I'm just telling you, there's not enough here for me to lose my mind that he's not going to come back.
I agree with you.
I know he's your guy.
No, I agree.
It's not all on him, but not enough has happened, I think, for people to have to lose their minds. It may end up being the move they have to make.
And Kwesi and KOC have to find the next guy regardless.
That's true.
If they're going to be here long term. So I'm fine starting with that now.
The time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in.
Republican Nikki Haley drops out of the 2024 presidential election. She was challenging former President Donald Trump for the nomination. Haley and Democratic Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips made the announcement the morning after Super Tuesday. That's when voters in 16 states, including Minnesota and one territory, cast ballots. Voter turnout was much lower here than it was in 2020. Many sites looking kind of like a ghost town. Trump and President Joe Biden both easily won the primaries here. Biden delivering his State of the Union Thursday night. Dan?
Justin, I'm going to give you a name. Are you familiar? Have you ever heard of a guy named Jason Palmer?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I hadn't either until doing some reading. Jason Palmer on Super Tuesday, beat the president in American Samoa's caucus by a score of 51-40.
Tight battle.
The great thing about it is Palmer said he learned that he beat him when, quote, my phone started blowing up with text messages. And I'm thinking about it because I'm going, maybe American Samoa is the one place where Dean Phillips should have campaigned,
get a little
with
buzz,
a chance to get a little bit of buzz.
Momentum.
He got no buzz.
Right.
Everybody's piling on him. We've talked about this intermittently the last few weeks. I get it when you get no juice that you're going to get mocked a little bit, to the point where I think even sarcastically he was kind of mocking himself at the end. But there's this ongoing strange dichotomy, this contradiction between people, including a lot of Democrats who want to rip him, and the same Democrats who privately are going, God, I don't know, is this going to work? Shouldn't we go in another direction? I'm really, really frightened. And so that's the great mystery of this thing, that no one else, and maybe because Phillips got nowhere, felt emboldened enough to say, well, you know what, I'm going to jump in because you know why? The country knows who I am. They don't know who Dean Phillips is, and it obviously never got off the ground. And we'll see in the end whether the Democrats, who are right now looking at 4 different major polls saying Donald Trump leads the president in all of them, will end up regretting not actually giving Dean Phillips a little bit of love.
Now, do you think the State of the Union will assuage any of those concerns? It seems like that's the message that they're trying to get out after the State of the Union. And I do think it's interesting that apparently Joe Biden is angry now, and he's got too much juice now. He won't stop yelling now, which I find fascinating given that everybody's been telling me he's asleep forever, 66 minutes, whatever it was last night. And it definitely wasn't a State of the Union. From the parts that I saw. I mean, I was in and out.
Stump speech.
It was, wasn't it? I mean, He took the opportunity that was granted to him. The president doesn't decide when he gives the State of the Union. I think the Congress has to invite him, right? And so he took it as, maybe I'll relaunch my 2024 presidential campaign here. That's essentially what it turned out being. So I'm curious if that will give him any juice, if that will give him any life, because clearly it didn't appear to me, Dan, that he was Sleepy Joe the other night. But we could do the election tomorrow, couldn't we? Yeah. I mean, and I almost wish that we could, unless, you know, the former President Trump ends up in jail or something because of one of these things. We could, though, couldn't we? Because these are the candidates. We don't need to go through this pomp and circumstance. And I think we'd be better off for it if we could somehow move it up.
Two quick items. Because expectations were so low, like, is he going to faint? Right. The fact that he got through the speech was enough, which tells you where the expectations were. And you're right. You can't go from saying, well, Sleepy Joe, he's going to fall asleep.
Why is he yelling at us?
He was way too amped. What was he on? It's kind of hard to go both ways there. And quickly, on Nikki Haley, who we started this thing with, the key question, where do her voters go? Because she's got some. Yeah. And the question is, do they have the cojones to actually vote Democrat? Probably not. Are they just not going to show up at the polls? That's what Trump's got to worry about, because he does need those votes, right? If he's gonna actually pull this thing off.
And it is a very depressed voting market right now, it appears.
That's very true. And because let's face it, this is the time where it has to do more with the fringes on both sides. I think a lot more people are going to show up at the election itself.
All right, moving on. This broke after last week's Enough Said show. U of M head football coach PJ Fleck got an updated contract with an annual bonus for him and more money for assistant coaches and staff. Fleck has been with the team for 7 seasons. So what do you think about the contract change, Dan?
Well, we're often accused of agreeing too much. We might not agree on this. I don't think it should have happened. I think you can be the AD and say, look, we've supported the hell out of you. We've given you a series of raises. I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting after a very, very bad Big Ten season this last year that you should be in any kind of trouble. But I also am not obligated to jump every time a job comes along, especially a job that I would argue most of the football expert, college football people I know thinks isn't as good a job as the one he has. So I think I think your guy Mark Coyle got played a little bit here. I know it's not unprecedented, and I'm not calling for PJ's head, but I don't like the look.
It all depends on how much you believe the UCLA smoke. And this has been a job, I think, that has been intriguing to PJ for whatever the reason, because it fits the profile. And honestly, I remember when we talked about it on the radio, I think the Friday before, I think if he was offered the job, I think he really would have considered taking it. A lot of it because he has been here 7 years. And as you know, that is a long time. Yes. Doesn't seem like a long time, but it's a long time in the college football world. And I was convinced Friday, if the job was offered to him that weekend, that he would probably take it, because what it does represent, and he knows this, it's a reset. It's a different clock. And he's in year 7 now. How many more bad, quote-unquote, seasons could he survive here at Minnesota? I think he knows all of those things.
I would have lived with it. Yeah. That's what I'm saying as AD. I'd have lived, because those are fair points. Yeah. I actually think I would have lived with that. And I still think, is it fair to say that he did his best work largely with somebody else's players? I mean,
some of them, yeah.
Some of the big ones, some of the biggest ones, and he's got to prove to me he can figure out the quarterback position after a big swing and miss this last season.
Yeah, I mean, he had his own quarterback that year. He had his own wide receiver. He had some of his own defensive players. But certainly defensively, a lot of those guys were there, no question. And now they've got a new
Okay, time for a lightning round. Sports journalist Chris Mortensen passed away this week at the age of 72. He was known for his contributions to ESPN for more than 30 years.
The thing that Mort represents and why this is such a big deal is he represents the best of a newspaper person making the transition seamlessly and not being about shouting about everything in doing it. He just continued to be a reporter and did it consistently and did it very, very well. And I think that's why it resonates with so many people.
And so many other journalists talked about how he supported them almost universally all the way up, whether it was health, career stuff, a lot of screenshots being shared that we'd never seen before of really nice and touching things that he had done to reach out to people. That's going to be a big part of his impact too.
The Wild play the Avalanche tonight. Thursday night against the Coyotes, they won 5-2. And on Monday, Kirill Kaprizov got his 6th career hat trick, scoring 3 goals against the San Jose Sharks.
Well, they're getting the proper treatment. Do we agree on that this week, right? With the lightning round treatment?
Lightning round.
And now it's trade deadline day, and there's some people have moved on. I don't know what we're getting back in return. It seems
we're getting like draft picks in the year 2030. Basically, of the 3rd round
the next wave
or later. So I wouldn't.
Will we have bought out Kirill Kaprizov by that point?
The question is whether we're going to have to bring back Flower. He's become the dominant goaltender.
I know.
Maybe he's not going to retire. He's going to stay with us.
He likes it here.
Well, Target Field getting ready for the new baseball season and removing the winter tarp on Wednesday. The Twins are in the middle of spring training in Fort Myers, Florida. They open up their season March 28th with the home opener on April 4th.
They could have lifted that winter tarp.
I was going to say, what took them so long?
6 weeks ago, couldn't they?
We could already have this. Could already be today. This
Do you
stock
remember the
footage
years where it had to be? They had to like Zamboni out all the snow, suck all the snow out of the stands, or these drifts, huge drifts.
Won't that be cruel?
Like
but what if that is the cruel irony? Is we have this whole winter and then we get to opening day and it's just dreadful for the first couple of weeks. Hopefully that's not the case.
Well, we knew he was hinting at it, but Eagles center Jason Kelce made it official. This past season was his last. An emotional press conference, too. Kelce was with Philly for 13 seasons, drafted by the Eagles back in 2011. He is 36 years old.
One of the most remarkable retirement press conferences I've ever seen, in that he brought everyone to tears talking about his wife, Kylie.
Even while he was talking blue, he brought people himself to tears.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
America was in tears talking about his wife. He was in tears talking about the size of manhood on his old quarterback and his old coach. He couldn't even talk after doing it. If you haven't seen the video, you got to watch it. It's one of the most remarkable videos I've ever seen.
Name me a better athletic duo in terms of success.
You can't.
Than these two. I don't think. How do you there's a few that may match, but I don't think any exceed. These guys are great.
It's like the Manning brothers, basically.
Players.
It's the Manning brothers, and they've got the entertainment deal as well.
True.
Well, finally, a big weekend to raise money for pediatric cancer research.
Right.
The Enough Said experience is being auctioned off for the local nonprofit Reading for Research, and current bid $1,000.
That's
so what do you think it'll go for?
Still time, right?
After people see this
to get in. I hope we get. Can we get to 2,000 this year?
Let's get to 2,000.
What about
the goal, right?
What about the KFAN experience? How's that? Well,
that's about $17 right now.
Not as high.
We could use a bump on that too.
Well, it's the power of TV, man. We all know it. We've all learned about it.
I want to see what happens in here.
The magic.